All right, guys, welcome to Cake. Little introduction to Cake. My name's Graham, and as always, I'm here with my compatriot, Derek Wyatt. And if he can sneak into frame. Cake is all about just providing actual down and dirty, useful tips towards concretely improving your business in ways that are less abstract and more functional and things that you can actually use. We're totally donation based, so feel free to toss us money or donate online. I look like the computer that is sitting here next to me, like that's the internet. But yeah, feel free to donate online as well. We have a PayPal button on our website. And today we're going to be talking about loyalty and habit. And I guess that ties into branding and just kind of creating a bond between you and your customers. So I looked up a few definitions of loyalty and habit, which I found a couple ones and kind of modified a little bit. So loyalty was defined as faithfulness or devotion, and I think often in spite of better or of other equal or better options. And habit is kind of a tendency to perform particular behavior given previous experience. And this is kind of the important part that's not as obvious. Experience performing the behavior in similar contexts, which ends up being really important. We'll talk about that. But the context that you're doing something repetitively ends up being just as important as whatever it is that you're doing. So this one's going to focus a little bit on actual, It's going to focus mostly on actual psych studies and on the science behind loyalty, and specifically loyalty programs, kind of giving your customers rewards for certain actions or having a VIP category that they can fit into. So in order to get into that, just a brief definition, which we've talked about before too, of association and what that means from a psychological brain standpoint, and also to your customers. So we are just creatures, human beings, of association.
You guys doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing fine, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I got distracted by a drink order coming in. We're just creatures of association. We are really good at taking things and saying, this happened at the same time as this, so they are connected. That leads to a lot of false things, like gambling addictions, for example, where we associate the money actually coming out with the process of pulling a lever, for example, which is kind of a false one. We do this all the time. We talk about like the kind of fallacy of correlation and causation. Like there's a really famous one where they realized at some point that ice cream sales and the amount of ice cream that was being sold was going up at the same time that rape was going up in a lot of areas. So of course a bunch of newspapers hopped on and said, "Oh, ice cream is causing crazy amounts of rape crime." But the real connective factor there is that it was getting hot, and the weather was actually causing both higher incidence of sexual abuse and of ice cream sales. So anyway, we're great at making associations, and that's going to tie in just a little background on that to the entire rest of this talk. A couple things just to kind of give you an overview of what we'll be delving into more details in as we go down. And this is going to be kind of an interesting talk just because it is so scientific, and there have actually been a lot of studies done on loyalty programs. So it's going to be a little jump from thing to thing, actually give you concrete tips all over the place. Basically, there's like so many actual useful things in here that it's going to sound a lot like just like a list of things that you can do to help your business and think of when you're setting up loyalty programs. So one big thing to consider is just familiarity naturally breeds comfort. And they have a term for this in psychology. It's actually just called the mere exposure effect, which is that merely being presented with something, even one time beforehand, makes you much more comfortable with it whenever you see it again. So the more you hear about something, the more good you feel about it. So the guy who kind of popularized this is back in the 1960s, and he did a couple things. One with baby chickens. He played sound tones while they were still in the shell. And after they'd hatched, he played some more sound tones and found that they, every single one of them, just preferred whatever tone was played while they were in the shell. And it's the same with people. He exposed them to different meaningless Chinese-looking characters, and then asked them to rate different characters according to how strongly good or strongly bad the character seemed, or negative or positive. And the people who had seen the characters that popped up, the people had seen before, they rated more positively. So Why is this interesting and useful? Just because making sure that the people who you want to contact, the people you want to influence, the people you want to make loyal to you, actually have that repetitive experience with you and actually encounter your brand over and over again and aren't just seeing it once every year or something like that, but creating multiple points of contact ends up being really useful. And this ends up maxing out around 10 to 20 presentations of something. After that, the effect of being omnipresent kind of dulls down. So, the 30th time that you see something within a week, it doesn't make as big a difference as those first 10. Ritual ends up being really important too, making kind of a distinct repetitive experience. So you can kind of think of like Oreos, the act of twisting them apart, or like the pop on a soda can or on Pringles. I believe it was maybe it was Mountain Dew or Coca-Cola. Actually, I guess Coca-Cola is Mountain Dew, or are they Pepsi? I just can't remember which one Mountain Dew belonged to.
Pepsi.
Yeah, they're Pepsi. Okay, so it's either Pepsi or Coca-Cola. Actually patented or branded the specific snap that their can makes when it opens because it was such a specific branded sound to them. So another thing is getting someone to just touch or interact with your product ends up being really important too. They call those touch points. And anytime when you can actually get something in someone's hands or get them to interact with it in the way when they'll use it on a regular basis rather than just telling them about it, that ends up being great, which is why you end up seeing so many free trials, which is why you see so many guarantees for money back. And even better in my mind, and a lot of kind of software especially is moving this direction, is towards the freemium model, where there's certain things that you offer for free, and then there's other options that people can pay for as well. Kind of like the direction that we plan on moving Cake, where we'll keep doing these sessions and workshops and lessons for free, and then do consulting and have that be the actual revenue stream. Which is great. It gives people a chance to get to know you, to experience you, find out what you're all about, and then actually lead them into, if they want more in-depth or things that take you more time to set up, actually paying you for that as well. And habit, this will come up too, is an association with something else that's habitual. So that's where that context thing comes in. Like if we always eat trail mix when we hike, then just the act of being on a trail will make us think about trail mix and think about eating that again. Campfires make us think of eating marshmallows. Peanut butter and jelly. I know these are all food-related examples. I swear it works for other things too. I think those were just, I think I was hungry when I was writing up my notes for this talk. The last kind of background thing to consider going through these things too is just that change is a painful process. It's really time-consuming, and learning new systems is incredibly annoying. And also, the longer someone's done something, the less likely they are to change. And that's just because it really is. It's incredibly frustrating to go and go all this effort to research something, find out what you think is the best, learn its entire procedures, figure out your workflow with that entire system, and then to switch is like a huge cost, both of time and often of money as well. And there's a name for that too, which is called switching costs or switching barriers to other people. So getting into kind of the specifics of, to put this in a little more concrete form, I guess, that'll make it a little easier to absorb. They did a bunch of studies recently on loyalty, I think especially in the 2009-2010 region. And one of them I found was actually really awesome. It was called The Review of the Theoretical Underpinnings of Loyalty Programs by Henderson Beck and Palmatier. Palmatier. I'm not sure how to say that one. But it basically it was written at the end of 2010 and breaks down all of the previous research done on loyalty programs. So if you guys get a chance, that was one of the main things that I drew a lot of pieces of this talk from, and I suggest going and just reading that entire thing. It's really incredibly interesting. But a few highlights from that and from some other sources that I kind of pulled together. One thing is that loyalty programs have been generally unproductive when you actually get into analyzing them. A lot of things that are rewarding your customers end up not really doing a whole lot to increase your profits or your revenues. Despite the fact that on average, I guess most families are subscribed to 12 different loyalty programs. Most profit benefits are middling if they don't produce losses, which a lot of the programs do. So kind of delving into that and figuring out what's going on there is going to be the purpose of a lot of this. So part of it is just what goes into a good loyalty program. And what they found was you can divide them up into 3 categories, which are status, habit, and relationships. So status, giving someone like VIP treatment, giving them another tier of service, basically. Habit, making it so that someone's doing something repetitively and it ties into their life and their overall narrative of themselves and kind of becomes part of their regular interactions with the world. And then relationships, actually developing a meaningful bond between you and your customers. And that's what you think of when you think of brand loyalty, mainly, is that last one, that kind of relationship for loyalty. So starting with status, I'm just going to go through some of the interesting studies that they kind of summed up and some of the key findings there, and then talk about the implications as well. So from 2005, Ashworth, this one covered a restaurant first date. And they found that redeeming discounts in a social context, like bringing a coupon to dinner, invoked personal feelings of cheapness and decreased ratings of attractiveness by others.
Nobody likes coupon flippers.
Right, exactly. So that's one thing to be careful of, loyalty region-wise. If you have like loyal customers and you're giving them discounts to things, watch out, because people might actually not want to redeem those discounts if they can't do it in private, or if someone else thinks that they're not paying full price for something. Another study by Dries and Nunes, 2009, for retail and hospitality. So the number of hierarchical levels in a status program positively influences perceptions of status, as well as preference for the program. So what that means is the more levels you have, so just saying like, oh, we have a VIP service. What you really want is like a bronze, silver, gold member tiers, and having those different tiers produces a nice interaction between those hierarchical levels, and even people on the lowest tier will show some preferential treatment for that. You need to be careful too. It depends on the field that you're getting into. It turns out that if you people who are more community-based and industries that are really based around the sense of equality, that different tiering will really sit not as well with them, because they want everyone to kind of be treated as equals, and even like the idea of them having preferential treatment over someone else kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth. This one was a good one. This one was Green Products, which is a 2010 study, and it showed that you have this problem with luxury products where it's just kind of like I was saying for that. You want to show status and you want to have this luxury item, but at the same time you don't want to be perceived as like different or in this whole different realm from other people. And they found that green products actually mitigate that. So things like the Prius, where you're spending a lot of money on something which is almost a luxury item, but you're doing something altruistic at the same time, and that altruism kind of counteracts that negative quality. So something to think about as far as setting up your own loyalty programs is if you can make it so that the loyalty programs are also donating to a charity or also doing something good rather than just giving your company extra money, then you're much more likely to see a rise in that and less guilt going over that preferential treatment. Consumers' prescriptions of receiving preferential treatment increased when higher status conferred through a retailer's loyalty program. So that was a study from 2007. What that basically means is that perception of receiving the preferential treatment, basically that personal attention ends up being one of the most important ways to signal some kind of special treatment. Like actually having someone walk up to you and take your hand and walk you through something, or spend a lot of time with you, even like take you out to drinks personally, or go out to dinner with you. That ends up being way more important than offering discounts or sales or anything like that. Another thing to watch out for is considering demotion or loss of benefits. And a study of airlines found that in tiered systems, kind of demoting customers ended up not only decreasing loyalty, it actually ended up having to be completely made up for by like huge apologies from the firms, and kind of like just basically placing all of the blame on their shoulders and saying like, we're sorry, we didn't mean to demote you, we know this is really dumb, we take the full fault. So be very careful of that. Like throwing someone into a VIP thing and then kicking them out can be really dangerous. Talking about studies that have been done on habits. Habits, once again, we're going to talk a lot about context in thinking about habits. So habits gradually form with repetition of a certain behavior in a stable context. And that ends up being actually the strongest connection that you can cue. So cueing the context is really how you want to get to the behavior, rather than like intentions or what someone means to do. And same thing for if you want to knock someone out of their habits, like if you're trying to steal someone away from another brand, or kind of just let other customers know that you're available as an alternative. Changing their context or switching them out of their usual routine somehow will make it the most. That ends up being the best time when you can get in there. Same thing, and it sounds terrible, but when people's lives are the most tumultuous. When things are going really just out of whack and not at all like what they expect, that's also the best time to get in and kind of instill new habits, because they're just totally unused to anything that's going on and can easily pick up new things. Also, along these lines, and we talked about this a little bit, a 2007 study, repeated behaviors predicted subsequent behavior. And this is in fast food, in TV, in transportation. And that was in spite of intentions to the opposite. So even when people said like, oh, I think I'm going to eat at this restaurant tonight, if they'd eaten at a different one the last 3 nights in a row, they were still more likely to eat in that one. The habit overrides our actual motivations and what we think we're going to do, which is interesting, and also just shows how bad predictors human beings are of our actual motivations. And then lastly, getting down to relationships and what that means. So relationships, and the most interesting kind of thread that I found throughout all of these studies on relationships was basically that you just need to be authentic, and you need to really make a point to make as much of a personal connection. Almost like the more you treat your customers like they're really your personal friends, the more you get that loyalty. So this is a really interesting one. This is done by DeWolf in 2001, and consumers' perceptions of relationship investments, so like of investments that your company is making in customers, enhance relationship qualities. Basically, like the more you invest in your customers, the more the quality of the relationships go up. And the more interesting thing to me was that interpersonal communication has the strongest association with that perceived relationship investment. So the best thing you can do is to actually invest in shooting off like a personal letter to your customers, thanking them for coming in, or giving them a phone call, or email can be so easily copied, and you can paste the names of the people, so that it probably isn't taken as kind of a legitimate form of interpersonal communication. But if you can make it obvious from your email that you're really writing to these people specifically, and you're taking the time to do that, they'll really know. And what they found too was that just in terms of return on investment and how much money and time you're throwing into it, that actually like profit-wise has the largest return on investment too. Like taking a customer out to dinner is going to be way better than offering some kind of refund or discount or anything like that. 1996 study by Goodwin on services. The likelihood of strong relationship formation increases with self-disclosure, time, and personality congruence. Which basically means like the more legitimately you act as a human being, the more that people bond with you and the more that loyalty increases. So the more that you just tell about both yourself and the business and what goes on behind the scenes and all of the kind of internal stuff that's usually like the more you let them peek inside the black box, the stronger they like you. The more time you just spend with them, talking to them and time around them. Like we said, there's that mere presence factor that kicks in. That increases their relationships. And also personality congruence. The more that you say things and then act on them in a consistent way, and the more you say things that are consistent rather than jumping all over the place with what you say your beliefs are or anything like that, the more that pays off in your relationship building as well. Which, so yeah, it's starting to pick up the trend. This is it's really just like, hey, be a legitimately awesome, good, honest human being, and people will like you, and they'll keep going to your business. This one was interesting too, another one kind of on that. So the return on investments in relationships with customer firms found the greatest investment was in social nature. So that's what I was talking about, like taking a client out to dinner. Financial investments, for example, discounts, actually just fail to return a positive, or fail to deliver a positive return. This is on business-to-business sales specifically, so ones that really rely on relationships. But in that, actually just giving discounts or offering some kind of cut doesn't balance out for how much you lose kind of just in your perception of value. Structural investments, for instance, paying money more into your own infrastructure, only pay off if interactions are frequent, so only if you're going to be doing that all the time. Another one on loyalty programs. This is the kind of communal benefits shared to the customers. They found that communal loyalty programs elicit stronger loyalty than programs relying on financial incentives. So if someone's getting into a VIP area in your business or your website or whatever, and that lets them access further interactions with other VIP customers, with other people who really love what you're doing and interact with it, that ends up being much better payout and much stronger incentive than just saying, if you're a member, you get this much off of your product. So what people really want is to be a part of a community. They want to belong to something and have a cause that they're behind. They don't just want to be getting a discount and have that be the reason that they're coming back. And the last one is just kind of breaking down some things that go into this relationship, which are brand affection, brand connection, and also passion. And just to give you 3 useful immediate things that you can use with all of those. Brand affection is just like how much they really care about your brand. And so I think for that, tying in your brand in some way to meaningful events in their lives is a really good one. You can think of it like the gift wrap principle, which is you actually your body, like, you get really happy when you get things in wrapping paper, because usually when we get things that are all wrapped up is at times when we're really happy and times that are celebratory times. So once again, that context specific thing, just by getting something in wrapping paper, you cue those positive emotions that are associated with it. And so that's like affection. So really it's it's a little bit of a metaphor, but you really want to gift wrap whatever you're providing to your customers. Connection, and that's that sense of really being part of a community, of knowing what's going on behind the scenes on your end, and also getting a chance to connect with other customers and feel like a part of the whole. Launching forums, which, by the way, if you launch a forum, here's how you do it. Find like 5 to 10 people who are you seed the forum with for at least 2 months, who will be doing constant posts and just constantly updating things at least 2 times a day, and just get the conversation going so that even if someone visits and you haven't had a single user who you haven't placed there as kind of a planted shill, you still already have an active community going on. And that's a great way to build connection. And passion is the last one, and for that one, there's a lot of different ways to build passion. You can read a lot from Steve Jobs, from 37 Signals, who I mentioned here as well, on that. And I think picking a fight is a really good way to go about it. Or at least to like kind of frame how you want to think about it, even if you're not the fighting type. But it's like that old saying, like, if you stand for everything, you really stand for nothing. And figuring out what you stand against is a really good way to cue passion in other people. So Cake does that really well, and like we don't support taking funding or bank loans. We're all about scrappy startups, about small useful ideas, about testing rather than just launching things blindly, which are all things that actively other people are not necessarily in agreement with. And you'll find that with a lot of strong brands, is that they actually go to pick fights. So to break down a couple useful tips that I also took away from just kind of poring over these and trying to make them a little more digestible. Research shows that habits weaken and are more vulnerable when the reason for a behavior is made clear, which is really interesting. So basically, like, the more that people feel like they're just being part of a system, and the more they feel like you're systemizing that sense of loyalty and that benefit that they get, the less likely they are to bond with you and to really do anything to feed into that as much. So putting and like, here's another way to think about it, I guess, is putting importance on loyalty programs, or even making clear that the mechanisms are in the hands of the customers. You've given them that standard by which to evaluate your business. You're saying, like, oh, like, look at how good our loyalty program is, which then says, they're like, okay, well, maybe I'll go look at how good other companies' loyalty programs are, rather than just, like, actually making that emotional connection. So I think that, like, in the grand scheme of things, random delight is way better than hoping to glean more customer sales by announcing discounts and things like that. So, for example, like, Zappos having discretionary happiness spending just so they can randomly make their customers delighted with is way better than, for instance, a coffee punch card at your regular coffee shop. Like, I think a much better method of getting repeat customers and of getting people to actually bond with you at a coffee shop rather than a coffee card would be, like, have your employees actually notice which are the regulars who are coming back, and after you've seen them a certain number of times, like, just give them a free coffee, which would result in pretty much the same thing, except people always lose their coffee cards. I'm sure you're not actually like losing that much money on those ones. But just the act of someone remembering you and giving you a coffee is like what you'd expect to happen when you've gone into a coffee shop enough. And the more you get to that actual legitimate relationship, and the more your employees have the permission to act like that and to reward people who they noticed are regulars, the better that kind of loyalty will be, and the more unforced it feels too. So it's almost like the less it's part of a program, or even if it is a program, the more it feels like what you do naturally, the better. Personal psychology plays a lot into it. So running your own tests ends up being really important. So another good example of this is people who are more independent actually prefer hierarchical reward. Yeah, we talked about this a little. Prefer hierarchical reward systems. So we talked about the inverse, which is that people who are more part of a group mentality prefer to not have hierarchical things because they feel like there's an imbalance of power there. But people who are really like individually driven and are more independent, they actually prefer that hierarchical reward system because it means that there's something they can work their way up to. There's some external display that makes them.
Example of the distinction between those two.
Yeah. So, for example, having like let's say okay, so let's use an airline one because that's just a really good example of loyalty programs in general. So having like if an airline has a loyalty program where just if you've flown with them a certain number of times, or like let's say you pay $100. And for that fee, you get a discount on all of your airline tickets. So we'll just do like a generally bad example because discounts are a bad way to do it too. That's not as good as saying, like for independent people, that would be less valuable than saying, okay, we have 3 tiers. We have this $50 tier, which is our like bronze tier, and that gets you these benefits. And then the $100 tier, which gets you like, a slightly bigger discount. And then we have like the gold tier, which is $200 and gets you this type of discount. And also you get a free drink on the plane. Whatever. And so more independent people will like that 3-tiered system, and more interdependent people, more people who are community-based, will like the kind of single system. We're not having a tier at all, and just having the rewards be spawned through natural actions. The free drink one is actually a really interesting one, too. They did a study on that one, which found that the overall benefit was really mitigated by the fact that bringing certain customers on a plane free drinks as part of their loyalty system just like meant that everyone else who wasn't a part of that felt like totally slighted and like really angry at the airline that they didn't get free drinks. So once again, displaying those what's going on and the kind of like the mechanisms behind something can really, that's another thing to be careful of, is this jealousy factor that comes in with other customers too. And that's actually the next one I was going to talk about. So being careful with loyalty programs of making other people feel unimportant. So a good way to kind of counteract this too, and so it's along with unimportant too, you also have that problem of you don't want to like give a discount in public. Like there's actually a few reasons why people won't want to take advantage of a preferred system when they're in front of other people, which is like they almost don't want to show that status lots of times, or don't want to accumulate that negative will, like that ill will. Yeah, exactly, the evil eye. So you can kind of think of benefits in terms of like local and global, or things that are like passive, I guess, and salient almost. So giving people an option to opt out of local benefits ends up being a good way to counteract that. So an example of that would be offering people discounts on floats, but giving them the option to just book online, and nothing will ever come up when they're in the shop or anything like that. So they get their full discount without anyone ever knowing that they got the discount. Same for gift certificates. We don't have special gift certificates that said like, say, good for a free float, but this one was paid for half off. So you shouldn't value it as much. That'd be a terrible thing to do. And the last couple things, the best loyalty programs will make it so that purchases aren't attributable to the program. So the program really, whenever you're doing a loyalty program, it should be reminding people why they want to buy things anyway. Not like the program itself shouldn't be your reason for buying, if that makes sense. So like if you're trying to get someone to buy like really nice bicycling gear, a really bad way to do that is to say like, hey, people in our program get like this amount of discount if they spend $300 at our shop. And a really good way to do it would be like, hey, like we really know you like the outdoors, like take photos of us or of you at these 5 trails, like the end of these 5 trailheads or something like that, and we'll give you a discount on this stuff. It's like remind them why they like the outdoors bikes to begin with, or put the speedometer on your bike, and when you hit the 500-mile mark, then you'll have like hit the threshold to like be a part of this club, and kind of like tie it into what their passion was to begin with, rather than just a price point. And along those lines too, the price one, I found a really awesome quote in this study, which was just kind of like, I don't know, I felt really good about like cake, I guess, when I was reading it, because it's such what we've been pitching the entire time, which is from a business standpoint, generating sales by decreasing price often negatively influences a firm's profit and can damage the brand and can be easily matched by competitors. Which I was just like, bam, like science proves it. I mean, I guess I said that science proved it before, but here's just another example of that. And I especially love the negatively influences a firm's profits. Like, giving discounts is not the way to go. That's pretty much all I have for you guys today. There's a couple other things on here which I couldn't really find a good place to put them, so I'll just go over them really fast. They didn't really fit into the overall scheme here too much, but there's another book called The Power of Habit, which I was going through, which is interesting, and there's a bunch of interesting things in there, but one thing that I took out was just different types of habits, which is just something to think about when you're trying to encourage habit building, trying to encourage people to kind of make your interaction with them a routine, which is that there's like repetitive ones, which you can think of as like grooves that are almost dug in our brain that are really hard to replace. Things that we've always done. That's a lot of the brand loyalty that you think a certain type of soda that you drink, or a certain type of beer that you drink, or even water, something like that. You also have meaningless ones that are repetitive, which is interesting. Things like shaking a hand or like wearing a certain color on a certain day. Things where it could really easily change with the culture, and you could probably just adapt to that and not feel too much loss from it. And I think that distinction was really interesting. Just the act of being repetitive is not enough to make it a habit or to make it a routine. It's that meaning or that context that goes along with it, once again, that ends up being the important thing. Like, just repetition by itself will not cause that. There's addictions, which are chemical or just based on our reward system. You know, it doesn't have to be a chemical addiction, but just things that really mess with our brain's natural reward system become addictive habits. And then I think the one of the more important ones, that, especially because it's one of the ones that we can really manufacture and not feel terrible about, is narrative ones. Habits that fit into a bigger spectrum of our narrative experience. Who it is that we want to be and what path we're going down and what story of ourselves that we're making. And the more that you can make your company fit into your customers' narratives, the more that you can make that a part of the story, that they're telling, like, I use this because this is the type of person that I am. That's a really strong habit that you can build as well. And with that, I think I'll leave you guys for now. We're going to take a tiny break and then workshop some things after this. Yeah, and then of course, just a little reminder: we are totally donation based, so feel free to toss in some money if you have some around. And we probably won't be recording the workshop section of this one, but feel free to grab any parts of this recording that you missed online, or just tune into our cake, and we'll be listing up some summaries from this, and I'll link to that article that I said that was really useful in going through a lot of this info. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back for the people here in just a second.